Hello everybody, this is Clint Locklear with the Regenerative Permaculture Farm and Garden Podcast. And I'm going to do a show that will definitely turn some off and may turn some on. But that is not the intention of the reason that I'm doing this show tonight. It's just a different, or let's put it this way. It is a true diversity of looking at permaculture community. And I may be the diversity part of this because I might be in a total 100% minority, or 0%, I guess you could say. Because that's what it's about. And I'm going to make a case of something that I'm not involved in, that maybe I shouldn't be talking about, but I have lived in a community for 5 years. 5 years. And because of that community, I learned a little bit about community. I don't live in one now. I have my own farm. I have my own house. I've got friends. We can cooperate. We can work together. But there is not a, quote, permaculture community where people live on the same ground. You know, they share in the expenses of the equipment, which is an awesome part of a community like that. I mean, just imagine if even commercial farmers, industrial farmers understood how important that could be, instead of everybody having a $500,000 combine, maybe only 1 out of 10, and they wouldn't have to spend as much. And the same principle goes towards somebody in that community. There's no reason for everybody to need a scythe. There can be 2 in the community and everybody shares it. The cost of living part of the community, when you really look at it from almost a utopian financial way, it makes a lot of sense. It really does. There's a lot of things about community you would have. If you had a big project coming up, you could get other people in the community to help, and in return you would help them. And it's kind of like the village concept of living that I think everybody kind of wants to go to. And it's put together in this, quote, permaculture community. But when you look at the history of permaculture communities, what do you actually see? Not what should be, what could be, what will be, but what is the history of this? There's not a whole lot of successful ones. There's really not. Even the big housing complex in Davis, California, that's not truly a permaculture community. That's a permaculture designed suburban neighborhood. And it functions very well. But I never got the impression from the studying I've done on that it is a community the way that community wants. And I think that community can happen. I absolutely do believe that it is possible. And I think it would be an awesome, powerful thing for it to happen. But if there's any diversity in that community, it's dead. It may last a year or 2 or 3, but look at the tore out souls that's going to leave that place before it falls apart. And it's because of diversity. That's going to be the main destructive force in any community, is diversity. So there shouldn't be any. And if you believe in design the way that I want to think that permaculturists actually do, you would design non-diversity into these communities. Now, I'm pretty sure if you're a social warrior justice type right now, you're going, yeah, listen to the white privilege that's from Tennessee in the South, doesn't want diversity, he's a racist, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I can pull out the same bumper stickers and say it. Listen. According to my DNA, I want to know which one of these I'm being racist towards. The white part, the Indian part, the black part, or the Spanish part. Because that's what I am. It's just what I am. It really doesn't mean any difference. Because what I'm going to try to explain from living in a functioning community for 5 years, that diversity is death. It is not going to be productive for the long term. Now, when you start a community or you start a project and you get a group of people together that have a love for permaculture, that is not going to be a long-lasting binding element for the community to work. I do not believe that. Because there's a chance for too much diversity to work itself into this. And if you let it work itself in, it will slice everybody to ribbons before it's over with. And that's not the purpose. So as designers, if we design in permaculture, we have to design non-diversity into a permaculture community. Now, if you're thinking that I'm referring to the color of someone's skin, or where someone is from, or the country that they were from originally or they live in now, then you are absolutely jumping the gun and showing a propensity of trying to project something onto somebody else, because that's not what I'm talking about now. The community that I was in for 5 years, I just quickly thought off the top of my head of all the nationalities and colors of different individuals that I worked with, and I'm sure if I spent a little bit of time on this, I could come up with some more. There were Mexicans, Italians, white folks, people from Iceland, black folks, women. There were Puerto Ricans. There were some from England, Thailand, Cambodia, the Middle East, South Americans, Spanish, people from the north, the east, the south, and the west of the United States. And we had zero diversity. Zero. Because the color of somebody's skin or where they come from doesn't mean shit when you're looking at if a community is going to work right, whether it be a permaculture community or a city. The color of their skin is not diversity. Their thought is diversity. So you can have a college right now, and you see them in the news about every day, where you've got white kids and black kids and Hispanic kids and true African kids and all these different nationalities and Asian kids that come together, and they say that they're diverse, but they all believe the same thing. No, they don't. That's not diversity. That is zero diversity, because their skin color is nothing more than the color of their skin. What they think, how they perceive, how they react. That is what true diversity is inside of a community. Because who cares? I didn't care if I was working with a Mexican or someone from Thailand or someone from the Middle East or someone from the Northeast or the West or Cambodian or Italian or a Puerto Rican. I didn't care, because we didn't have any diversity. Not a single bit of diversity in that. Now, the community that I'm talking about is the military. There's zero diversity in the military. There's both the genders. Well, I don't know what you're going to say about that now, since there's like 73 genders or something. But at the time, there were two genders, male and female, and every color of epidermis under the sun. And we had zero diversity. And it worked very well. Way better than, by the way, than I hear story after story after story after story after story of permaculture communities. So if we want to have a successful community, kind of what I'm bringing to the floor is just to think about this. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying that I've got all the answers about this, because I absolutely do not. But I do see diversity as a problem inside of this. Now, see, that was a community that we slept together, we trained together, we went to war together, we talked about girlfriends, we cooked MREs together, we did everything together. And nobody gave a crap about the color of somebody's skin, because the culture, and I keep in mind, I'm a type K individual, I believe in culture over is more important than it is the color of somebody's skin. It didn't matter to me what color their skin was, and it didn't matter to them if I was white. It just didn't matter. Because our culture was the same. We could work together. Would there be little arguments here and there? Sure there would. There were human beings. But it worked almost flawlessly. And if somebody started stepping outside of that culture, the rest of the culture, just the regular individuals inside of that culture, would step in and correct it very, very quickly. But in the military, if you had a bunch of cultures put together, the military cannot work. Neither can, is what I'm like putting an argument out, neither can a permaculture community work with diversity. It's a complete impossibility in my view. Now, if someone can prove me wrong, please do. You know, just send me 4 or 5 different communities that's been going for 10 years with the people that founded it, and the majority of people stay there for, 8 of those 10 years. Because that's what that's what the purpose is. I mean, I love the idea of community, and I want them to work. So I'm just bringing in a different view on just from someone that's lived in a community that did work, that's looking at people that really desperately want to have live in a permaculture community. And I admit, there's parts of me that thinks that would be 100% on the awesome scale. It would be really, really neat to be surrounded by people that believe and are practicing permaculture the way that I'm doing it right now, or similar, but maybe a little bit different. But it's all basically the same. Our systems could be different, our methods, our techniques, but it's the design of permaculture between humans and their environment. Between the energy flows, all of that type of stuff we all get excited about. I think that's really neat. And I think financially, it makes a whole lot of sense. And at the end of this, I'm going to tell you how, if I was going to have a community of permaculturists, what it would take to get in it. And I probably would not have a single taker, which is why I'm not going to be in a community. It's not something that interests me as much to actually do, because I don't want to have the drama of having a diverse community to have to deal with. I just don't want to deal with it. To me, the drama that would come along with that would be worse than the advantages that I'd have to put up with, and eventually I would leave. I wish I could. I wish that Dunlap, Tennessee would turn into the permaculture capital of North America. And everybody that I saw every day had their permaculture systems and their permaculture farms, and we were all buying and trading with each other, and we were helping each other in markets and all that type of stuff. I could see that working before a community, unless you design non-diversity into it. And that diversity is thought. Because that is a powerful weapon when it's used against people. And it is all the time. Now, why would I bring this up? I was listening to some podcasts by Paul Wheaton. Now, I don't know Paul Wheaton, but he seems like someone that truly wants to bring permaculture in the mainstream. He wants it from the housing you live in, to the food that you eat, to the way that stuff is grazed, to the way animals are treated, to the way an apple tree is treated, where you don't shake it and because it's disrespectful. He wants that to be in everybody's lives. And it seems like that is an honest thing that he's trying to do. And I totally agree with him on that. So Paul has openly, honestly, I think, talked about an issue that has happened out at Wheaton Labs in Montana. And when I was listening to this, it was very obvious to me, an outsider with no skin in the game, coming from a zero culture working community, what the issue is. And that's what I want to just have some people think about. That's all I'm saying. Let's just think about it, for goodness sake. You don't have to agree with me. Before you start throwing stuff at your radio or whatever, just try to have an open mind about this. Now see, when I was in the military, that was, like I said, that was a zero diversity culture. It was a mission-based. Permaculture is also a mission-based to a point. So that can be pretty similar. But we all knew the rules. We all knew what happened if you broke the rules. But it was very mission-driven. You realized, literally, that your life could be in the hands of the guy standing next to you. And the color of his skin or where he come from is irrelevant. 100% irrelevant. And when there was some people that wanted to bring diversity of thought into that mission. Now, I know that if you're sitting there right now and you're very much into everybody should be creative and individual and all that, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. You should be in a community of people that think just like you. 100%. It might work then. But whatever that is, it needs to be. But the way that we had it in the military was we knew what the culture was. You dressed a certain way, your haircut was a certain way, you didn't sleep in like a bum till 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you made your bed every morning, you did your physical exercise, you trained on whatever it is you needed to train, you didn't want to look weak in front of your other buddies. You wanted to be there and you knew what the culture was, so even if it wasn't something that you totally agreed with, you went along with it because that was the culture. And it worked. Now I'm going to give a permaculture example. Now we always say in permaculture that we should study nature and learn from nature. Do we really believe it when it comes to all aspects of our lives, or is it just something we talk about when it comes to food forest? If you really believe it, nature shows you that some diversity is not capable of working together. And I'm going to give a very easy example that anybody can look up if you can't automatically think of this off of your head. You get a piece of property. It's got some magnificent black walnut trees on it. And the rest is just cut field or it's a yard. And you want to put in your permaculture system. Now, when you look at a regular forest, you have all of this diversity of all these different plants and fauna and everything that's working together and it's fertilizing itself and all that cool stuff we talk about. But if you go stick an apple tree 10 feet away from that black walnut tree, the apple tree is going to kill, or the black walnut tree is going to kill the apple tree. How is that possible? Diversity is awesome and perfect and pure. The more the better, right? No? There's a lot of plants that if you plant them next to each other, one will kill the other. That diversity does not go together. And that's in nature. With no malice, with no type of ideologies, no agendas, no personal or race ideology, politics going on, nothing. Nature shows you some things are not compatible. And no matter how hard you try, if you stick them together, one of them is going to die. That's nature. Now I'm going to give you a real world, truthful example of cultures that do not go together. As a young man in the military, after getting out of the air assault and the airborne schools after my infantry training, I went to a unit, 101st Airborne Division. Not long after that, I get kind of used to the guys in my squad, and we're on this big airplane heading to the Middle East called Desert Storm. That was a culture shock to me, coming from Tennessee. The men wore dresses. The women were covered from head to toe. Their houses looked funny. Their food was kind of funny to me, even though the bread was some of the best I've ever had in my life. But it was very, very different. And it didn't bother me at all. It was just different. I mean, I knew I was going to another part of the world with people that had to learn how to live in a desert environment. They dressed different, they ate different, they lived in different houses. I was really interested in why they did what they did. That part didn't bother me a bit. Lo and behold, one day I'm sitting at our on post, Camp Flodd, with 101st Airborne, and me being an M60 machine gunner, that was my job in the military. And there was some civilians kind of hanging around at the gate. They couldn't cross the gate, they were hanging around at the gate. Middle Eastern men. And up pulls this blonde-headed, probably 24-year-old Midwestern girl, young woman, whatever you want to call her, in a 5-ton truck, delivering something to somewhere on our base. And it's like 115 degrees. And she gets out of the truck with her BDU pants, her boots, and in a t-shirt and a hat, which was, we were totally all geared up, but she's driving a truck, for goodness sake. She gets out of the truck. The Middle Eastern men take notice. One of them walks over to her and grabs her boob as soon as she gets out of the truck. Me being from Tennessee, I could not believe my eyes. I couldn't. She knocked his hand away. He pushed her against the truck, shoved his hand down the front of her BDU pants, and when he shoved his fingers inside of her, it was with such force it tore her underwear. She was in absolutely disbelief. I was in total disbelief. There was a culture difference between the Middle Eastern men that were standing at that gate and the blonde-haired girl that now has a stranger's fingers up in her vagina as he pushes her back against the truck. My culture reacted. When I was pulled off of this Middle Eastern man, I don't think he had anything but wisdom teeth left in his head. I don't feel bad about that one bit. I doubt he ever bared children after that, and I do not feel guilty about that. Humans do not do that to other humans. See, in my culture, it doesn't matter what color the girl was or where she was from. I would have done the same thing, reacted the same way if an American soldier would have did that to a Muslim girl. Class of cultures completely are never going to get along as long as they believe that an unchaperoned woman is basically a whore, and you can do whatever you want to, and it's doubly good if she's an infidel. See, that culture will never match with women that think that they are strong and equal to men and their bodies are their own. Those two cultures will never mix. A few years after I got back and I was out of the military, I was talking with an uncle of mine, and he was just talking about different things, and it brought this story up. He used to be a paid civilian ambulance for the Saudis. And that's when I actually got the true history of the culture of the women have to be chaperoned, or they're considered a prostitute, And if it's an infidel, just have mercy on her soul. And all of this culture stuff that I'm listening to, I couldn't even compute. No matter if I was in their land or not, I would have a hard time following that culture. I'm never going to do that to a girl. Never. Nor am I going to let a girl get abused by a guy if I can do something about it. That was their culture. That's a true story. Completely incapable of getting along. And that's an extreme example. I admit that. That is an extreme example. But I wanted to use that because when smaller parts of culture fester, they become almost that bad. And if you look around the world, you'll see how that's happening. Now, see, Paul has got this idea. And I've never talked to Paul, guys. I don't know Paul. I mean, Paul could be the biggest peckerhead in the world, but he sounds like he really cares on his podcast and in his videos. And all that is one big sham. I don't think it is, but it could be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know him. He's not a personal friend of mine. But as I'm listening to Paul, and I've listened to several different podcasts from Paul on community. I mean, Paul, when it comes to this, Paul Wheaton, it's almost like he's sadistic to himself. I can't think of the movie, but I'm sure y'all seen scenes like this. You've got this like demented, crazy Catholic priest that goes in front of the fire or the mirror and he gets out this whip and he rips off his shirt and he beats himself while he's crying and screaming and asking for forgiveness. Like self-repentance. That's kind of how I feel about Paul. Like he's this crazy Catholic priest that's just hurting himself. That's really the way it comes across to me. And the reason that I think that Paul had problems was because he had diversity in his ranks. And it's not going to work. I'm not saying that having no diversity is going to be easy, because it's not. Because if you got a hard-working person and a lazy person, have you ever met a lazy person just to come right out and say, yeah, I'm a lazy SOB and I don't want to do nothing but mooch off everybody else? No. I don't know how you're going to design some type of selection phase into a community, but that's what I would do if I was having a community. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you really should go. If what I'm saying upsets you about there should not be diversity, I know your professors have told you diversity is nothing but pure and all this, and all that is a lie. It is an absolute lie. That is, if you understand what it is. It's thought. It's not color of skin. But if you go to the Homestead and Permaculture podcast, which is from Paul, listen to episodes 377 to 380. It's like a Kardashian reality show of what happened inside of his community. It's crazy. It is absolutely insane. And I will give Paul credit to publicly talk about these things. He's trying to build community, and he's got like dysfunction on top of dysfunction going on in what he's trying to do at Wheaton Labs because of the diversity. But go listen to it yourself. Now see what Paul does, and the way Paul has looked at his place, as close as I can tell. I'm not speaking for Paul. But if you want to get an acre of land on Paul's place that he paid for, or paying for, one of the two, it's $400 a year. That's less than $34 a month to live somewhere. Now, what Paul interestingly has done is he's treated it kind of like, if you want to be a caveman, there's the cave. You got to go out, you got to kill it, and you got to bring it home. And from a abstract point of view, that's really cool. Most people have never had to do very much for themselves. Their parents paid for everything. They went to school. They got babied. They get out of school. They're with a bunch of friends that's never done anything. And they sit around and they complain and they whine and they snivel and they think they're smart and they're always being cynical and putting down everybody else. And they ain't done a damn thing their entire life. But they know they can do it. They know it. And one of these particular people went out to Paul's because he wanted to be a caveman, or as Paul calls them, an ant. See if they want to be a grasshopper. So Paul gave him the cave. There it is. Bare ground. Build your house, grow your food, plant your trees, whatever you need to do inside of your own permaculture system. This is what it's going to cost. Here it is. Now, do you think you can go buy an acre of ground somewhere for $34 a month and have access to 200 other acres if you want to graze cattle or sheep for existence, or go out and hunt, or go get building material? Probably not. Not anywhere you'd actually want to be. That is what Paul set up if you didn't know what he's done. You come out and you take care of yourself. We're not going to feed you like you're our child. We're not going to pay you an allowance like you're our child. You're a grown person when you come out here. You're choosing to get a bare piece of ground that if you make it into a permaculture paradise, you can stay here forever. And if you decide you want to leave, you can sell those upgrades. Now, when I hear what Paul's done, all I can think about is that Catholic priest scarred his back with his own whip. I really think Paul wants the community to work so badly, and he wants people, no matter what their economic state is, to have a chance at it. He's made it so cheap that people don't even respect what he's done for them, which is pretty obvious if you listen to those podcasts. Now, what happened with Paul is there were some, Paul sets like, this is what it is. This is what it cost. We're going to have some contests. These are the rules. It kind of sounds a lot like somebody that has some structure. But the people coming in don't like structure. See, that's a diversity of culture. Paul even said there's a lot of them just like to sit by and watch the clouds roll by. And he's totally fine with it. If that's what they want to do, that's their prerogative. But they don't have money because they're watching the clouds go by. And they start getting bitter because they don't have money because they're watching the clouds go by. And they tried to do some income revenue stuff, and it seems pretty obvious that they really don't know how to do that. They haven't self-educated themselves on that to the point to make that work, or built enough social capital to make that work. And they get bitter. And there's Paul, the big kingpin, charging them a whole $34 a month. And then this is a difference of culture that I'm pretty sure Paul was not expecting. Paul was giving them the opportunity, whether their gender was male or female, to be a man. Take care of your own self. Make your own way. But when you get whining, sniveling, little, for any feminist out there, I'm saying this in a non-generic term, in an adjective that everybody's going to know what I'm referring to. When you get a whining, sniveling, little spoiled bitch that is a direct conflict of the culture of you got to be the caveman to bring your own stuff in, it's not going to work. It is absolutely not going to work. Because that young man did what all spoiled little brat bitches do. They start trying to turn everybody else against whoever they see as their oppressor. And they make stuff up. They exaggerate. They do all kind of... If you listen to those podcasts, it's almost hilarious how bad this guy had to try to come up with some reason why Paul was the big peckerhead that he's trying to make everybody believe that he is. Because if Paul really was, you wouldn't have to stretch it that far. Because the only thing from me, because my culture is different than the young man's that was doing all this, is you could have left. You could have, if Paul was really that bad, you would have had plenty of real stuff that if you wanted to air your open laundry like that you would have something significant that you didn't have to stretch and lie and exaggerate so much about. That's all I'm saying. Now, the diversity that I've talked about, like I said, I want you to just think about it in these terms. It's ideology and it's thoughts. It's not skin color. It's not where somebody's from. It's not if somebody's great-great-grandparents were slaves and these people were the slave owners. It's right now, in the moment, what they truly believe. What is their ideology and what do they think? Because if you have two groups of thought, like someone that gives you a piece of ground to go out and kill it and bring it back to the cave, and you're whining, sniveling little bitch, it's not going to work. That's two different ideologies and cultures. And that's partly the reason why when you listen to Paul, he can't believe what this guy was so upset about. Because Paul's culture is not the whiny, snivelly little bitch. So having real diversity in thought, what does this mean? So this is where, if you want to have a conversation on Permaculture Community, this is where you're going to have to work this out. See, like people in the Middle East, the guys that think it's okay to treat women that way, if they decide to, in their culture, treat women that way, and the women are totally okay with it, I don't have a problem with it. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want my wife being a part of it. I wouldn't partake in it. But if that culture, that's the way they think is the best way to run their community, knock themselves out. The moment they try to force that culture onto somebody else is where the issue arises. So when I'm going down this list, I'm going to be more on the volunteer side, more on the libertarian side, more on the entrepreneur side, because that's what I am. But when I'm going down this list and I compare one thing to the other, and that's what you think that you are, or that's what you really are, that is completely the right answer for you. The issue is going to arise if you try to join a community that is different in the culture, in the ideology, and the way that you think. That's where the problem's going to arise, and it's going to be ugly. Like an example, there's a lot of permaculturists that do not believe in personal property rights. They've got all kinds of reasons, and we're not going down those rabbit holes today. They got all these reasons why they think they've got a right to step on other people's property rights because of what they believe. And they're going to be that way because they believe it and they think it. Even if they're not saying it when they first meet somebody, that's what they're thinking. There's going to be an issue. So someone believes in personal property rights and another person doesn't believe, they should not be in the same community. Permaculture is not going to be this bedrock, big idea, concept that's going to overtake all human psychology when it comes to working with other people. It's just not. The goal of wanting to bring permaculture mainstream is not going to ever have a property rights person and a non-property rights person get along long term. Because the property rights is going to look at property rights and they're going to make decisions based off that, and they don't want someone that's going to come over and abuse that. And the people that don't believe in property rights are going to figure out every way they can to either shame, force, or abuse their way into using someone else's property because they believe that's the right way to go. It's completely incapable of getting along, just like a black walnut tree and an apple tree. That's what we got to figure out what to design. I mean, can you think about a capitalist and a socialist in the same permaculture community? They're going to be at each other's throats. Unless they're both 100% true voluntarists. Because I don't care if you're a socialist or a Marxist. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a socialist or a Marxist permaculture community. I'm totally fine with that. Don't try to force that on me. It's not going to work out very well. I believe in personal, ethical capitalism. 100% believe in it. No matter all the theories and the snide remarks and everything, whether one is right or the wrong, they're incapable of getting along unless they're complete voluntarists. And if they are, they can get along. So I could easily get along with someone in a permaculture community if we're both voluntarists and we truly believe it. We truly believe it. And he's never going to try to force socialism on me through votes or regulation or an HOA or shame or passive aggressive or aggressive type of conversation to back me down to get his way. As long as that never happens, it doesn't matter to me if he wants to be a... We can have conversations about it. Doesn't bother me. But if one thinks that they're right and the other is wrong, and they've got to make that other person, I think it's genius what Paul says, they have to make you obey them. If they think that they have to coerce you or make you obey them, there's going to be a problem. It's not going to work. You can tell from those podcasts from Paul, being a business owner, someone that has revenue streams, someone that does stuff like that to make money, to buy the farm, to do all this stuff that they do. The people that don't have businesses, that don't look at business owners like they're just somebody else that's doing something different. And since he was not a voluntarist, from the words from his own writing, the guy that got mad at Paul, he was trying to turn people against Paul because Paul was a business owner. Now again, if everybody's a true voluntarist and believes that, you can have business owners and non-business owners in the same community. But it doesn't really work out that way in the real world because of all the virtue signaling and shaming and all this stuff that everybody knows is really going to happen if you put a hardcore capitalist with a hardcore socialist. There's going to be issues. But see, I've never heard anybody talk about this within a permaculture community. Paul is a capitalist. He wants every permaculturist to be rich. And there's permaculturists that think that a righteous permaculturist grows his own food, lives in a yurt, and has a zero carbon footprint and all that type stuff. Now, if one is generating money and one thinks it's a sin to generate money, there's going to be a problem there. They just don't need to be together. All the capitalists should be in one. I mean, I guess you could call that permaculture community going galt. And the other one can be whatever socialist name that this turns them on for, and they go over there and they do their thing. I don't think it'll work for the socialists because it never has. But if that's what they want to try, God bless you. Go do it. And there's a lot of this stuff that I think people need to really write down and have some way of making sure there's no diversity or as little diversity as possible inside of a community unless you're going to have some way of testing that someone is a true voluntarist. You have aggression within people, and you have people that do not believe in aggression. I believe in the non-aggression principle unless someone's attacking me or I'm defending somebody else from aggression. You're never going to have a problem with me. Was I trained to be aggressive? Yes. Can I turn on aggression before most people can blink? Absolutely. Can I flip the switch in my civilian brain to go to target mode? Yes. I can. No one's in danger of my training in the civilian world. None. Unless you're aggressing me. But there's a lot of people that are very aggressive and they want to aggress against people, whether it be mentally or physically. We're not going to get along in that. And you also have to throw in this thing about being passive aggressive, because that is a form of aggression. I don't put up with passive aggressiveness. I see it the same as being aggressive. I don't act aggressive back. I just don't put up with you and don't hang around with you. It's just not something I'm interested in. So you would need to have a community that has certain rules that are ironclad about aggression. Whether it be mental, physical, passive aggression, you'd have to figure all that out. And everybody would have to understand that from the beginning. And you would have to figure out a way to enforce that on people in the community. Because what I see personally, just being honest here, what I see a lot from the very progressive left, it is extremely aggressive. Anything they target, they get super aggressive about. I don't want to be a part of that. And people like me don't want to be a part of that, regardless of how much we love permaculture. So you'd have to figure stuff like that out. And I'm just going to go down through this list, and I just want you to think about these a little bit. Just think about them a little bit. Why this would cause such a problem. And keep in mind, diversity of culture is ideology and thought, not skin color. Someone with a high work ethic, or someone that likes to be a lot more lazy and relax a lot and watch the clouds go by. Perfectly fine on both spectrums of that scale. But if you throw envy on the side of the guy that's not working and somebody is working hard and their system's better and they're making income, there's going to be jealousy, which is going to turn to greed, which is going to turn to aggression or malice. So it's just not going to work. If you're a very verbal, social warrior, justice, gonna fix all the problems in the world just by protesting and screaming and all that type stuff, and you see social justice in everything that you see, rock on with it. But you're not going to get along inside of a permaculture community with people that don't see a reason to have social justice explosions on every single topic. People are not going to get along. An entrepreneur and someone that's envious are never going to get along. Envy in that part, to me, is just part of greed. I think a lot of the socialism and the Marxism is based in envy, personally, even though it's not stated that way, but when you really look at it, that's what it seems to me. See, I've got friends that I'm not in business with, that we're all entrepreneurs. If one of us makes a home run on something, do you know what none of my friends do? Is get jealous or upset or envious of that. We're supportive of another entrepreneur that steps out and actually creates something and he's rewarded for it. But a lot in permaculture is very envious of anybody that has anything. And they come up with all these moral reasons to degrade what someone else has done. That is it's incapable of getting along inside of a permaculture community. I mean, if you put down, are you an envy, jealous person on a form, no one's going to say yes to that. I don't know how you're going to figure this out. Someone that believes in structure and someone that believes in no structure, you're not going to get along. There's going to be issues. Very purple, woo-woo permaculturists are probably not going to get along long-term with people that aren't very woo-woo and are just more logical and reason-based in what they think. But see, what the cool part of permaculture is, all the woo-woo people can go woo-woo in their permaculture community until they just pass out from woo-woo-ness. And that's awesome. And this other group doesn't have to do any woo-woo, and they can pass out from whatever it is that they're doing with this, their permaculture bliss. There's no reason to try to mix those two, because there's going to be a problem. If you're a race warrior and someone else is not a race warrior, and someone sees everything through the vision of race, regardless of what people's skin color is, and it doesn't really matter, because if a black person says that they're a Trump supporter, they're an Uncle Tom, so it's not really race, it's ideology. You're not going to be able to get along. So if there wants to be a permaculture community that's all this like race is the main thing, by all means, go do your own community. Just don't try to spoil somebody else's, because you're seeing race in everything that they say or do, and they don't even have a clue what you're talking about half the time. There are mentally strong people and there are mentally weak people. So you can see this in the military. The reason most schools and most more elite groups have what they call selection phases. You have buds training for the SEALs. You got selection phases for if you want to be in special forces. You've got certain tests you have to go through before you get in Ranger school. The first 2 or 3 days of any type of major combat arms school is nothing but a mental test that does nothing but get rid of the mentally and physically weak. Now, inside of permaculture, the physical weakness is not really the issue. You're not carrying a 100-pound ruck, and you're not walking 20 clicks in the dark in 4 foot of snow. But the mentally fragile part, mentally fragile people and mentally strong people have a hard time getting along. That's just a fact. And when you're trying to, in the military, do these schools, the first thing you do is have a selection phase to get rid of the mentally weak. Because everybody that goes to that school thinks, and I want you to think about this, thinks that they are whatever it takes to go to those schools. Now, outside of military, think of the American Idol, that show that was on for like 10 years. There's thousands of people that sing like I do, that would make a dog try to tear its own head off to get away from the noise. But in their mind, they're just as good as Whitney Houston. They think they have what it takes. And when they're told for the first time in their life that they really suck at singing, because they actually do, they fall apart because they're mentally weak. And a lot of that's the parents' fault. But they're mentally weak. Mentally weak and mentally strong people are not going to be very compatible. Because one is always going to be feeling sorry for herself, and one is always going to not be feeling sorry for herself. So when one tries to bring up him feeling sorry for herself, and the one that does not believe in that type of ideology, like me, I'm not the easiest person for a mentally fragile person to be around. Because I'll tell you, to get your head out of your fourth point of contact, and you need to start figuring out how to make it where when you walk, your nuts are tinkling together because they're made of steel. See, that's the way that I was taught that a man should be. Not a whiner. Not someone that gets their feelings hurt all the time. Not someone that can't stand anybody correcting what they're doing without having a mental breakdown. It would be hard for mentally strong and mentally weak people to get together. But if the mentally weak want to go do their own thing and the mentally strong go do their own thing, I think it makes perfect sense. You have drama queens and you have people that hate drama. I hate drama. I run away from drama because it's a waste of my energy and it sucks the power out of me to be around it because it is a useless, mentally weak exercise. I hate drama. You put me around some drama queens and there's gonna be an issue. We're completely incapable. I have stopped having friends because for whatever reason over time they've turned into drama queens. Don't want that in my life whatsoever. Drama queens love drama. Or drama kings. Just so no one gets their feelings hurt. They love it. So they need to be in their own community because they're incompatible with people that don't want drama. You have jealous and non-jealous. You have bullies and non-bullies. I hate bullies. Hate them. You want to see me get righteous, try to bully me or bully someone that I care about. Can't stand it. But there's a lot of people that like mental manipulation and bullying and screaming and all that type stuff. They like it. That's cool. Go do your own thing. But it's not compatible with someone that doesn't want to be around bullies. Inside of the communities, when I'm talking about mentally fragile and bullies and stuff like that, one of the things that came up in Paul's episode, which is it's got to be something that's figured out in a permaculture community, and it's got to be ironclad, and everybody's got to like give an oath of blood or something on this for make this work, and it needs to be swift action when it shows up. People that try to get their way by aggression cannot be allowed to be in a community. They will destroy it. Because they're going to roll over some people and they're going to butt heads with people that aren't going to be bullied. But either way, it's destructive inside this permaculture community. So there has to be something put in place, designed in place, that aggression gets zero rewards. Aggression gets punished somehow. Either socially, monetarily, you have to leave, ostracism, something. You cannot have aggression from people of a community against other people inside of the community. And I'm just going to be open and honest here, guys. That's going to be really, really hard for a lot of extreme left progressives because that's how they've been trained to get their way. But if y'all all want to abuse each other, I'm totally fine with that. Just have your own community. I don't think much will get done, but y'all can go do that. But you can't have somebody like that in a functioning community. Not at all. You can't have people that see oppression and everything with people that believe in equal opportunity. I believe everybody has the same equal opportunity. You may have been born in a different place. You may have a different skin. If you live in America, you may have a rough beginning, but you can still figure something out if you want to be successful however you want to be in America. And it doesn't matter any type of background. Because I sure as crap didn't have the best one. So if someone sees oppression and everything, it's going to be incompatible with people that believe on the equal opportunity. See, what Paul did was equal opportunity. Here's an acre of ground. $34 a month. You've got to figure out what it is you want to do, and you got to do it. That's equal opportunity. Oppression is Paul is charging me $34 a month. He's just making all this money, and it's just so wrong, and he's not giving me money, and I can't eat all his food and all that. Yeah. See, one seeing oppression, one sees equal opportunity. It's incompatible. But I think the biggest thing is somehow, if you're going to try, which I still think is a mistake, but if you're going to try to have diversity of culture and thought and ideologies inside of a permaculture community, it's going to have to be with people that are truly voluntarists. See, I believe unless someone tried to force me into their ideology, I can get along with near about anybody. I've got some really cool hippie friends I like hanging out with. I know some very woo-woo type hippie friends, and we get along just fine because neither one of us tries to force anything on either one. We just enjoy the moment, and we're not trying to coerce either one. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care if you're gay or straight. I don't care if you're a drag queen. Don't care. I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you're poor. I believe you should do whatever it is that you want to do. But don't try to force your ideology on me. And we'll get along just fine. But that's a really hard thing for people to do. Because everything gets split up in these teams. And this team's always trying to beat that team, whether it's Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative, progressives, all the way to, I guess, hardcore libertarians, permaculturist, non-permaculturist, whatever it is. Everybody's trying to force their agenda and make somebody else do what they think is the right thing for somebody else to do. And since that's the way human nature actually is, that's why you got to have zero diversity. Because if you had a permaculture community that were mentally strong, entrepreneurs, we're not envious, we're not jealous, we're not drama queens, believed in property rights, all these type things, and were volunteers, they'd probably get along just fine. Just fine. But you throw in somebody like the little whining, sniveling bitch that Paul had to deal with, he's going to screw everything up. And he's going to work at it really hard to screw it up. Really hard. Incompatible. So what would I do if I was going to start a permaculture community, which I am not? I would treat it the way we treat it in the military. Now, this is just off the top of my head, so there's no details, and for goodness sake, just don't try to copy and paste this one, because I don't know what in the world would happen. I would treat it just like you wanted to be in the Special Forces. You would have a selection phase. Now, let me tell you about the selection phase if you're non-military. It sucks. You have to prove that you want to be in this community. And if you go, I don't have to prove nothing. Yeah, you've already proved to me you don't want to be in this community. Hit the road. Well, who says I got to prove anything? Hit the road. Because I already know that you're probably mentally weak. You don't like structure. All the things that's going to make this community work, you wouldn't like. So you're incompatible. We don't want diversity in this community. I would have one or two tiny houses that are not palaces. And say for 6 months, you've got to work for the community. Every single person in that community, you're kind of like the slave labor. They can tip you or not. You're not going to ask for money. But for 6 months, you're slave labor doing whatever crappy job they can come up with. And if you start whining and complaining and bitching and moaning, you're out of here. At the end of this selection phase, everybody that's in the community is going to have a sheet. Were they whiners? Yes or no? Did they show up on time? Did they have a good work ethic? We would go on down the list of what the culture of this permaculture community would be. And then there would be a vote from the people in the community. Do we want this guy inside of our culture? Is he a match for this culture? And if one person says they don't want him here, he ain't here. Now see, that would be a hard thing for a lot of people that want to do permaculture to have to put up with 6 weeks or 6 months of being slave labor. That's pretty easy compared to what it takes to be make it through selection phase of special forces. We're letting you sleep. We're not starving you to death. We're not road marching you to death. But you're going to be picking weeds, building fence, making hugelkultur beds. None of it's for you. You're going to prove that you want to be part of this community. That's your selection phase. See, and after a couple of months, see, the first month or so, it's not really going to matter because most people can hide their true emotions for a while. That's why it needs to be like 6 months. You have to come with enough money to support yourself with your own food for those 6 months. You're not getting a handout. You're not working for food. You're working to prove that you want to be in this community. But after a few months of doing that, people's true nature comes out. And the reason that you do it inside of Special Forces because they can only have one culture, zero diversity, in a Special Forces group that goes into a foreign country and tries to do the stuff that they do. You can't have people that tear apart the team. And it comes across really harsh from people on the outside looking in. But see, the thing is, everybody that goes through that selection phase, they know that they're where they're supposed to be. And they wanted it. And they had to prove it. See, most people don't have to prove anything today. I mean, I'll give a good example. I was listening to the news the other day, and I think it was Minneapolis, but I'm not sure. There was a police chief that's having trouble filling police jobs. And the other, the politicians are sitting around in front of her asking these questions. And this was a black lady, by the way, not that it really matters. But basically what she said is the reason she couldn't get enough police to fill the positions is millennials. Now, I'm not picking on millennials. This is what she said, but I want you to think about this. They don't want to work weekends. They refuse to work nights, and they want to be police chief in 2 weeks. That's what millennials want when they get a job. And that's what millennials want when they go into a community. They don't think that anybody has the right to ask anything of them. It's owed to them. See, if I was going to run a community, you'd have to prove that you wanted to be there. That's the reason I wouldn't get anybody in my community probably. But if I did, I could probably get more done with 5 or 10 people in a community like that than a dysfunctional, diverse permaculture community with 1,000. Special Forces prove it every day. Don't let what your perception of what they do, unless you really know what they do, confuse the issue of what I'm trying to say. It's a tight-knit group of guys that's like a family. No, I take that back. It's a tight-knit group of guys that are not like a family because they actually don't try to tear each other up. That's what a community needs to be. And you're only going to get there somehow, some way, by designing non-diversity into a permaculture community. Everybody's got to be on the same page. Believe what it is. See, the beauty of this is, I truly believe the beauty of understanding this concept is the right people will be with the right people. And this is part of the reasons why when you see cities that are so focused on skin color, it's so dysfunctional. It's because of this right here. It doesn't work. Because it's not about the color of someone's skin or where they come from. It's about their ideology and the way they look at the world. And that's the only way that I can see permaculture community working. That's my thoughts anyway. Just mull it over. Think about it. Listen to those podcasts. Because the stuff that happened to Paul would probably be cut to a minuscule percentage if there was a way to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And it's not just because they love permaculture or they want to give it a shot. I really don't know what Paul's going to do. I don't know what their when someone comes in and wants to move there. I mean, I don't know what their procedures are. I'm not going to even act like I would even know what to tell somebody in that situation. Which is partly the reason I don't see any reason to do it. And until permaculture communities can understand that the right people need to be with the right people, I'm not going to look at being into one. I don't want to have that drama in my life. It's totally us as us to a community to be adults about people that can and cannot get along and just accept that's the way that it is. You know, in a perfect world, everybody would get along, but we don't live in a perfect world. Not everybody is honest. Not everybody's going to pull their fair share. Not everybody believes in equal opportunity or dragging it home to their own cave that they built with their own hands. It's easy to talk a good game, but when you put people in close quarters, the mask of what the reality of the people are come out. And if they're a diverse group, they're going to cut each other to shreds. So just think it over, mull it over, disregard whatever you want to do, because I'm not here telling anybody what they should do. I'm just giving an observation. That's all I'm doing.